Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So this is a video that I said I had a really hard time getting to upload. I kept having copyright issues, so I'm finally trying to get it finished once and for all. This is a 1968 Thomasville nightstand. I'm saying a 1968 because from the research I did, this is approximately about the year this nightstand would have been made. So, of course, what I'm wanting to do is refinish it. And you can see here, from what I can tell, this had been spray painted black, which made it really hard to deal with. Right here, I'm just removing the hardware that they put on. And, of course, like I do with any furniture that I do, I always vacuum it out really well. And then you'll see right here that I'm going to be cleaning it. And I'm just using some Dawn dish soap in my water. So I'll be cleaning both pieces really well before I start any kind of sanding. Now I can tell that this piece, this is real wood, except for the top of the nightstand, which you'll see the problem I run into. So my hope with this was, right here I'm just checking the drawer runner to make sure it's okay. What my hope with this was to sand all of it really well, but to sand the top of it enough that I could just restain the top of it. But you'll see here in a few minutes that I run into a problem. Like I said, this had been, from what I can tell, spray painted with black spray paint, which is really sad because this is solid wood. You know, they don't make furniture like this anymore with this kind of solid wood. So I'm still just going to work on cleaning it here for a minute, getting all of it wiped down really well. And you'll see me go back and forth, and that's just because I'm wanting to give the nightstand itself time to get really dry before I begin sanding on it. So right here, I'm just going to clean these drawers the best I can. This was pretty dirty. So I bought this at a secondhand store where I live. I paid $30 for it. And I felt like that was a really good deal on it, for one, with it being a name brand, Thomasville, and the fact that I could tell most of it was solid wood, like these appliques on the front of those drawers that you saw, that was even real wood. Now, I had already done a little bit of sanding here, and I'm using a pretty abrasive grit, which would be, I think I started with a 120. Again, my hopes was to get that down to wood so that I could restain that. So I put this up right here talking about veneer wood. What that is veneer is actually wood, but it's a very thin piece of wood that they will put sometimes on the top of furniture. If you're not careful, you can burn through it. Now at this point, using a 120, 180, I'm kind of realizing that I've got veneer going on the top, but I'm still wanting to really, as I lose my vacuum bag, I'm still wanting to see what's under this. Now, all of this I could tell was real wood, what I'm working on now. I am, though, still using this grit because I want to get those areas cleaned up really well. So I'm going to go in with some sandpaper into all of these grooves. This project was really hard because of all of the sanding that I had to do in all of the little creases and crevices, and of course I didn't show all of it. Okay, so here I'm going in with a 220, realizing, okay, there's no way that I'm going to be able to get down to the wood on the top of this because it is now veneer, I can tell. And so with veneer, okay, now I'm going to show it right here. So you can burn through it, which means you've now burned through that veneer. Now, what it is they will put this veneer piece of wood over particle board, which is what the top of this is. So that's just to explain that a little bit. So at that point, knowing now, I'm going to just have to repaint this whole thing. I went with just a 220, which is what you would want to use if you're just wanting to do a scuff sanding, because what you're going to be doing is just, that you're going to go through and just paint. I did want to fix the corners on this. Now, right here's a good example of particle board. You can see that. But this is veneer also. You can see me bending that right there. That's another example of veneer. And again, veneer is real wood, but it's very, very thin, and it's just usually placed over a particle board. But right here, these edges were in pretty bad shape. So what I'm wanting to do is go in and just fix those by putting some glue. I needed some clamps here, and I didn't have any. So I end up using just a tape to hold this, and it did work. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm just getting some glue underneath that veneer. And of course, I'm wanting that to lay back down flat against that particle board right there. And they do make syringes for glue to do this type of project. So right here, I'm just going to secure that. Like I said, I didn't have any clamps, but this worked fine. I made sure that tape was pretty tight to hold that there, and it worked out okay. So that's what I'm doing right here, is just trying to fix this area. And you'll see me also working on the other side of this. The other side wasn't as bad right here, but I did, of course, want to get that to lay as flat as possible. And this, I'm just putting in fast motion. This would have been a very long video had I not put a lot of it in fast motion. So once again, I'm just going to secure that area. I'm pulling that tape. I know it's hard to see, but I'm pulling that pretty tight. And that stays on. Here's my handy little cart that I bought. And now I'm going to work on sanding these drawers. I am right here using probably a 120. I want to get the spray paint off of the dovetails on those sides. And just to clean that drawer up really good. You want to do that. And I'm just sanding here. And the sanding here, like I said, is just to clean that area up really good. I know, again, now at this point that all of this is going to have to be painted. There's no way that I'm going to be able to get it to the wood. So now everything with this now has been scuff sanded at this point. And if you saw in my one video where I talked about my new journey, I explained that I was going to be doing a lot of the prepping and sanding outside, and that I would be doing the finishing work in my she shed. So this is what I'm doing right here, is getting everything back to my shed so that I can work on it inside. And right here, I'm just showing you the new hardware that I bought. Those will be the new handles. And here I am inside of my shed. There's Lindsay saying hello. So at this point, I'm just wanting to give this a little bit better sanding on top. Again, of course, knowing that this is a veneer, and knowing that I'm going to have to paint it. But what I needed to do, there's that corner where I had burned through. I'm really just trying to smooth that out really well. Once you burn through that veneer, it makes it a very porous surface. And like the primer, really it'll just suck that in to that particle board, which is what's under the veneer, like I explained. Now, this top corner that looks this bad, I somehow lost the clip, but that took a lot of work with me having to go in with wood filler, let it dry, sand it, more wood filler, letting it dry. This project really took me a lot of time. So here, like I said, this is the primer by Dixie Belle that I'm using. And I only did, if you're wondering, you'll see in a little bit, I did only do one coat of primer over all of this. Now, I knew that I was going to be going in with a darker color, so I knew that this would be this was enough primer to use. Now, of course, had I known that I would go in with a light color of paint, of course, then I would have given a second coat of this primer. But with me going in with a darker color, that was not necessary. So I'll be giving everything now just a really good coat of primer. Now, if you've been following me at all and listened to my one video, I explained that I've done DIY a lot. This shed that I'm working in, if you're new to my channel, this is my little she shed that my daughter and I completely gutted out. We repainted all of it, put a lot of work into it. And I've done furniture in the past, but this is the first time that I've actually done a piece of furniture knowing that I was going to want to sell it. So I knew that I had to be pretty thorough with it, with getting it to look as good as possible. So right here, those were the old knobs. So these right here, what I'm pointing out, those were the holes that I filled where those old hardware knobs were. And I did drill new holes at this point already for the new hardware that's going to go on. I didn't video that. It was a lot of measuring I had to do to get those exactly right. So that did not get videoed. So I was just pointing out the new holes right there. And where I had covered up the old ones. Now that's what I mean by a dovetail. And of course I'm going to tape that off. You don't want to paint over the dovetail. It just makes it look sloppy. So that all got taped off before I continue with using primer here. And yes, Lindsay's in the background putting her fake nails on. So like I said, this is the first piece of furniture that I've done knowing that I was going to try to sell it. This was where my journey began, as I talked about in the video explaining, and I'll link that video. It kind of shows me getting this she shed ready, knowing that I'm going to be using it to start flipping furniture in. And I'm just showing the Bonding Boss by Dixie Belle in the primer again. And I do finish that edge on the bottom. Okay, and it's a new day and we actually got snow. Now this video would have been made in the very early part of February. This is about the time that my husband and I, after being separated, for those of you that know, had gotten back together around the 1st of February. He actually gave me the money to buy all the supplies that I needed to buy this table, all the supplies that I needed, just a little bit of FYI. So I'm just showing those are the new hardware holes. Again, I only gave everything one coat of the primer, knowing that I was going in with a darker color. Of course, this would have gotten, and I could have used a gray primer here, but I bought the white, and that's what I had to go with. So right here, here's this corner again that really caused me so much work. This is why you've got to be very, very careful not to burn through that veneer, because like I said, once you do, you're dealing with then just particle board, and that is so porous, it's very hard to get sanded. So I'm just reminding here that I did, before the primer, like I said, that took me a lot of time and using a lot of wood filler, sanding, more wood filler, sanding, because that area had gotten very porous, very rough from me burning through that veneer. Okay, and here's the color of paint, Stormy Seas by Dixie Belle. It wasn't I ordered it online from the Dixie Belle company. It wasn't exactly the color I was wanting. I think I was wanting it to be more of a gray blue, and it was a little bit more of a green color, but it ended up being a really pretty color. The lady that ended up buying this loved it, so that all worked out. So I'm just showing that, and right there, of course, I've taped off. You want your lines to be as clean as possible. Like I said, I'm knowing I've got to be very meticulous with this because I'm wanting to sell it. So right here, I'm wanting to fill in those old hardware holes from the inside, wanting to make the inside of this drawer, of course, look as nice as possible. And believe it or not, as old as this was, the inside of these drawers were in pretty good condition. I was surprised. So here's everything with one coat of primer. And here I'm back with the wood filler again. because now I'm noticing that there are some more imperfections on the top, and I'm wanting to go in and just fill those one more time. Especially the top of a table or nightstand, you want that to be as flawless as possible. Okay, and right here, I'm going in with a 240 grit. I'm reminding you that the higher the number of sandpaper, the less abrasive. So, of course, once again, wanting everything to be as smooth as possible, in between sanding, you want to go in lightly with, now I'm using a 240 grit here just because I'm still not happy with, it's just not as smooth as I want it to be. But normally in between painting, you want to go in with like a 240 or a 400 grit. This really is important because that's what's going to give a really smooth finish with your paint. It doesn't take much time to go in with that 240, 400 very lightly in between your layers of paint. And I am just sanding over these old hardware holes that I had filled with a wood filler. Again, I'm wanting all of this to look as flawless, as clean as possible. So I'm sanding over those holes on the inside as well that I had filled in. I mean, you've got to think when you're going to sell furniture, if it's not to the standard of what you would buy, somebody else probably isn't going to buy it either. So I really did work really hard on getting this to be as flawless as possible. And this is not a project that I made a lot of money on. I'll tell you now. So I bought this for $30. I figured that all my supplies, including the paint, was another $30. And I was able to sell this for $150, making a $90 profit. But if you were to figure the hours spent on this, I think I spent like 30 some hours total on this. I made about $5 an hour. So this was not a project that was necessarily a great flip. And this is my first time working on furniture in this way. You know, normally if it was something for me, I would give it a good sanding, paint it, and be done. So that's what I made on it, about a $90 profit. And I'm happy with that. The lady loved it, so that's great. So I'll go ahead and tell you that now, what I sold that for. So this is the chalk mineral paint. I showed the color a little bit ago, Stormy Seas by Dixie Belle. Now with this chalk paint, you do have to apply this with some water. So what you're going to want is some kind of a mister spray bottle. Right here, I'm getting ready to do the first coat on everything. I never want to dip my brush or whatever I'm using into the original jar of paint. I just think it's better to pour some out. So I'm just making sure there's no dust particles left here because I had done some sanding. And this is my continuous mist spray bottle. At this point, I'm not exactly sure what I want to use this is kind of a little foam sponge. I'm just not quite sure yet what I'm wanting to use to paint this. And this worked, you know, I definitely see now why people spray paint, not spray paint, but spray the paint on their furniture. Had I had a sprayer, this project, I would have saved myself hours and hours. So I had to be, of course, very careful that I didn't have any runs in my paint. This is why it was very important that I did do the sanding in between my paint layers to make sure this was as smooth as possible. So right here you see me spraying some water. And I do like the chalk paint. I would definitely use it again. You just, like I said, you've got to apply that with some water. So I'm showing my first coat. And up here, I had just sanded it with 400 grit. Wanted to wipe off any dust. And you can see that I'm spraying this down with the water again. And this is all, I'm just kind of trying to figure out here what I want to do. This was a foam roller that worked really well for applying the paint. Now, I did end up giving all of this furniture, everything got 2 coats. I did end up doing 3 coats on the top of this. And again, that was just because of that, the imperfections on it. And I wanted that to have as much coverage as possible. If you're wondering where I learned a lot of this from, I follow a girl on YouTube. Her channel is called Furniture Flipping Teacher. And she's great. Really, she's the one that I learned so much from before I started this. And you can see here where I've taped off some of the inside of this nightstand. Again, wanting to keep this as clean as possible with my paint. I'm just showing that I'm going to start painting up there. Now at this point, that base around the bottom of this, I hadn't quite decided what exactly I was going to do with it. Was I going to just go the same color all the way? So I kind of held off until later to do the bottom of that. Thinking that I probably was going to do that a different color, I went ahead and taped that off because I still, like I said, I hadn't quite decided yet. And as I'm showing here, I'm using my sponge 400 grit sander to give that a quick sanding before I go in with my second coat of paint here. And by the time I got the second coat of paint on, it was really looking sharp. So there's the second coat. Now here I'm getting ready to go in with the satin top coat by Dixie Belle. A satin or a matte finish is the best thing to use if you're wanting your imperfections to not show up and be so highlighted. I didn't want to use a matte on this. I wanted it to have just a little bit of a sheen to it, just to make it look a little bit nicer. Satin is, I think, a really nice top coat to use. Here's my wedding ring if you're seeing it. Keep in mind that my husband and I at this point had just gotten back together around the 1st of February. If you're following me, you know the story with that. Okay, and here we are dealing with the base of this. Now, I know for sure I'm going to paint this, that I'm pointing out a different color, a darker color that I had ordered. And this was called Mud Puddle by Dixie Belle. It also was a chalk paint. So at this point, I've decided that all of this is going to be painted in that color. I wanted to give a little bit of something to it rather than going just all solid. I'm pointing out that right there I am going to go back and paint that in the Stormy Seas. But so right here, I'm really wanting, and there that is painted. This is one reason you want to move furniture around and look thoroughly at it so you see exactly what you're dealing with. So right here, I'm showing that I've already put a coat of the Mud Puddle color on this base right here. And that did clean it up, I think, a lot. You know, not that people are going to be looking at this furniture as up close as I am. I still wanted it to look as nice as possible. Right here, I'm showing that I put some little foot protectors on. These are just nice so that that furniture isn't, you know, scratching a wooden floor maybe. And also, it just protects the furniture as well. So I did put those on all corners of this. Okay, so knowing now that I am going to paint this with the Mud Puddle color, is it exactly the color I wanted? Probably not. Again, my hope was really to do the top of this nightstand in a stain and this part around the bottom, but that just wasn't possible. So I used what I had, which was this color and the mud puddle. And it is a nice color. So I'm just showing the inside of the drawers. They really are not in bad shape. You know, I cleaned them, sanded them. But thinking back to the way I would feel, I wanted this to be as nice as possible. And there's pros and cons with adding, this is just a peel and stick wallpaper. It was I was impressed with the texture of it. It was not very thin. I just felt like it would make the insides of the drawers look neater. I feel like that's something that I would like to have done. Of course, telling the person that bought this that can be taken out. I also explained to her that there was nothing wrong with the inside of the drawers. If she didn't like this, she could remove it. I did just feel like it made the inside look a little bit neater. Now, I spared you the torture of what I went through getting this inside of the bottom of these drawers, because this part was not fun. It wasn't terrible. I do think the best way to do this, like you see, that edge, I lined up right directly with the front of the inside of that drawer, working my way back. I do think that's the best way to work with that. And this took me quite a bit of time to get it right. But it did come out looking really nice. And I thought the pattern looked very nice with the color of the nightstand as well. Again, just making the inside of the drawers look just a little bit neater. Now I'm getting ready here to go in with my satin top coat, again by Dixie Belle. I ended up doing 2 coats of that on everything, but the top, I'm thinking, I know I did at least 3 coats on this, of course letting it dry very well in between coats. I may have even done a 4th coat. I'm showing here the sponges that I used, and they work great. The one thing you want to be really mindful of using when you're applying this top coat is you don't want to go with back and forth motions. Get that coat on with your sponge and leave it. So don't go back and forth, with that. Get one good coat on. You'll see how I do this here in just a minute on the top, and then leave it, let it dry. I didn't do any sanding in between my coats of clear coat. I wanted to be as careful now at this point as possible with it. So I'm just showing you want to coat that bottom of that sponge really well. And I can link all my supplies in the description that I used. I've got a list in my Amazon called DIY. So you can see I'm just going to work that from one side all the way across. You don't want to go back and forth too much with that. It's hard not to want to do that, but you've got to just trust the process at this point. So I'm going to get this coat on the top, working from one side all the way across, and then I'm going to let that dry really well. And I can't remember, I may have lightly taken a 400 grit over this first top coat, but I don't think that I did. That really shouldn't be necessary to do that. Okay, and I'm just getting ready here to use this Feed and Wax by Howard's. It's just a wood conditioner. I think this is just really great for reviving that wood, conditioning it, and it makes it look a lot nicer. Now, what you're going to see me apply this with a brush, and again, this will be in my link for my DIY supplies. You just want to get a nice layer of that on, and you don't really have to let that sit too long, and you want to go back in with a clean rag and wipe that off. You don't need it to be really thick, especially if you're using it on the bottom of the inside of a drawer. But it does dry. It won't, if you use it on the bottom of the drawer and wipe off the excess and it dries, it's not going to hurt clothes. I worked on these dovetails the best that I could on the side of the drawer. I showed you what dovetails look like. That's also, just so you know, one way you know that you're working with a little bit more better quality furniture if the sides of those drawers do have the dovetail. Now I'm also going to use this on the runner of the bottom of the drawer and on the wood runner on the inside of the nightstand. It just helps those slide a little bit better. Now these drawers were in great shape. I didn't have to fix anything. They already slid in and out very well, but it never hurts just to give that a little bit of a lubricant there. And I'm just going to show where I apply this. I do apply this to all of the wood on the inside of the nightstand, and as well as these runners. And like I said, I applied this, let it sit for just a little bit, came in and wiped it all back. And the runners in here were in good shape. I didn't have to do any repairs with those. So guys, this is where I'm at. This is finally the video that I had a hard time getting up. Right here, I'm just adding the new hardware with my favorite little tool that I love. So like I said, I paid $30 for this nightstand. I figured I spent $30 in supplies, including my paint, sandpaper, all of those supplies that I needed, with the hardware as well. The wallpaper, I broke it down, $30. I was able to sell it for $150, leaving me with a $90 profit. So if you stayed for this whole video, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed watching it. And I did learn so much from this project. I really enjoyed working on it. Tons of work. Here's a picture of the before again. Spray painted black. And the after.